That's some fast speed typing there, Ash, on the keyboard. We've got some keyboard ASMR going on. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Remind podcast. My name's David Masterton and I'm joined by Dr. Ashleigh Moreland. For the keen-eyed viewers that are watching on video, you might see that our backgrounds are very, very similar to last week. And I cannot confirm or deny if we've actually recorded this straight after last week's episode. Having said that...
I can confirm.
Oh, here you go. You heard it first here, people. It's an exclusive. It's an exclusive. Okay, so last episode, which we just finished recording probably a couple of minutes ago, thanks for confirming, Dr. Ashleigh Moreland, was a big one. It was about sort of, I suppose at the core of it, it turned into about sort of shame and responses and how that all happens, but we're going to use this episode to actually unpack that a little bit more. We spoke about it last week, 5 minutes ago, in the context of children and parents and things like that. But we're just going to go what it's like when shame is triggered in relationships. So,
yeah.
Over to you.
Oh my gosh, this is huge. And some of it, I really want to differentiate between, there are multiple factors that can contribute to our dysfunction. One of them is from simply, it's just learned behavior. That's just how we were taught to communicate. That's what was modeled to us. It's all we know. And so we have inherited shame. And what I mean by that is maybe not the feelings of shame, but we have inherited the language of shame or the behaviours of shame or the actions or thought processes of shame, simply because that's what was modelled to us by parents who felt it, or again, maybe that was inherited as well. So there's that. There's some things that are simply just learned behaviours. Then there are things that we have or demonstrate in our lives and in our relationships that are from our past experiences, where we have felt those suffocating feelings. Often shame and fear go hand in hand, where if, let's say, for instance, someone rejects us and we then develop a fear of rejection, it also means that anytime something happens in our environment that triggers that trauma response, it brings up shame. And shame ultimately at its core is that not enoughness, not good enough, rejected, abandoned, that kind of stuff. Really big, really, really big. And so I'm seeing this more and more and more in, I think I mentioned in the last episode that I've had so many couples reach out, which is, it's not that I don't work with couples, but it's not my focus. And to have so many couples reaching out around the same time, this is what's been coming to the surface. And so some of the behaviors, like, we don't even recognize that we're doing it. So some of them are things like, I'll give you a really simple example. Let's say one partner says, I am really stressed about, being home alone with the kids all day. And what they're needing to be in that moment to feel seen, heard, and validated is just to be witnessed, simply to be acknowledged. And so that might sound like, I'm really sorry that you're feeling that way. What do you need right now? But instead, a response that is either from a learned behaviour of defensiveness or triggered from shame, what that might look like is stress. You don't know about stress until you've had to deal with my workload. What about my day and my stress? Which completely invalidates their experience. And this can play out, like, that's just one example, but there's so many. Like, if defensiveness, the self-defensiveness, if I said to my partner, I felt really hurt when you didn't call me back. And they said, well, I was busy. Don't you think I had things to do as well? Like, I've got a life too. That defensiveness is a self-protection, self-preservation, which is either, as I said, a learned behavior of defensiveness and a lack of skill or lack of emotional intelligence in being able to meet someone in their own experience, or it's protecting a wounding that is within them, which perpetuates shame. So I could give many, 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 many examples of where this plays out in relationships, but ultimately it all kind of, to me, comes down to the same thing, because in traditional couples counselling, there's so much focus on the behaviour and there's so much focus on what has been said and done in the past. But I find that to be completely unhelpful and unhealthy, simply because unless we are coming to the now, let's look at the evidence in the relationship now. Let's look at the relationship that you want to have. How do you want to feel? How do you want it to look? And then who do you need to become in order to have that relationship? Which means, what is it that you need to process? What is it that you need to heal? What is it that you need to be able to, what skills do you need to be able to develop and learn? Because without those things, then the cycles perpetuated by learned behavior or embodied shame are just going to continue. There's no area for growth. There's no room for growth or healing.
Yeah, well, 100%. Behaviour is a way of justifying an emotion or a wounding when it comes to shame, right? So I won't feel this way if you aren't the catalyst.
Yeah.
But I will say as well that behaviours are important, because behaviours, they basically represent what we're doing and how we're reacting to our environment or to other people. So it's not like this whole, we won't get into, you could use this like in spiritual bypassing, that it's sort of like you need to change, it's not my behaviour that's triggering you. You need to do, you need to heal for it to be the case. That statement is correct, but when it's used for the intention of bypassing and allowing the behaviour to continue, then it's simply bypassing. And
that's right.
For someone who's gone to couples counselling, it really does come down to who's right and who's wrong. But when you come into it with the intention of, because again, by the time you get to couples counselling, each person, whether they communicate it clearly or not, already has a bit of a gauge as to, am I doing this to put a tick in the box, or am I doing this because I need a safe space to end the relationship, or am I doing this to actively grow and I'm confident that the partner's going to work with me? And shame around why you're doing it is also really important, because you might get to a point where you go, it doesn't matter what's going to happen, I want out. Or it could be, I genuinely want to feel better, but I can't feel better if you're doing that. And it all does come back to how you feel about any given thing. An example of when I've started healing, some things that I could not stand, behaviours I simply couldn't stand in the past, I'm now indifferent to, which is great.
There's
because
no emotional charge.
No, there simply is not.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I accept behaviours anymore, because part of loving yourself and part of being authentic to yourself is going, you don't need to change as a person, whoever I'm dealing with, but it doesn't mean I have to put up with it. So I can wish you well, I hope you eat, but you're no longer eating at my table. Okay?
Yeah.
That's all good. As opposed to, you need to do this because every time you do that, you prevent me from being able to do that. And if you do this, we cannot have a relationship. Blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is. So it's it's really important to go on a healing journey by yourself, because that's the only way you can sort of change it.
Oh, yes.
Because
Exactly what you just said is the main take-home point. We could end this here, Dave, because what people need to understand is a relationship is its own separate entity that two people, sometimes more, I'm not judging however you want to do your relationship, but the relationship is an entity that is co-created by two individuals. Now, two individuals, if one individual is partnered with someone who's emotionally not available, who is, etc., all the dysfunction,
yep,
there is a wounding in them that chose that. That was a frequency match for that. They chose that. Now, when we are co-creating a relationship, it takes two to have healthy communication. It takes two to create an emotionally and psychologically safe container of a relationship where we can grow, where we can heal, where we can elevate, where we can expand. And this is where I feel like most people, and even we did couples counselling as well before we separated with my first husband, and this is where it completely missed the mark for me, was going, in this model, the person in front of me is the relationship. It's not real. I am co-creating a separate entity that is the relationship with that person. And so what that has to look like, the only way I work with couples is we look at the co-creation that those two individuals, through their past, through their wounding, through their biases, through their projections, their expectations, their shame, their trauma, that they have created, the dynamic that they have created, the atmosphere they've created, the conflict, the way they navigate it, the communication, they have co-created that. Then we look at, if you imagine the relationship all the way up here that you desire, that you want, what does that look like? How do you greet each other? How do you deal with conflict? How do you communicate with each other? How do you meet each other's needs? When you're expressing a feeling, what do you want to see from them? What do you want to hear from them? What is, like, literally, we do a relationship alignment blueprint of going, okay, if this here is the ideal, what does that actually look like? You would be surprised how many people say to me, I don't know. I know I don't want this, but I don't know what I want. I don't know what it looks like, which means that they're in a lose-lose. The partner literally can't win because they don't even know what they want to see. And so then we look at, okay, if this here is what you currently have and this is where you want to be, what's the gap? What is the barriers in the individuals? What is the gap in skills? It might be, I don't know how to communicate my needs. I don't know how to set boundaries. I don't know how to give them space when they're losing the plot. Whatever those skills are, we can upskill on an individual level. What is the wounding that is holding you back from being able to have this? And that looks like things like, again, in that shame response, if my husband had a bad day at work and he was in a bad mood, it would trigger me into a shame spiral, like I wasn't good enough for him to come home and be happy for. Like he wasn't happy to see me. If you loved me, then you'd be happy to see me. I had to resolve that wound so that I could actually be separate from his experience, where I could have the relationship with self and uphold this emotionally and psychologically safe environment for him to be able to have a crap day at work, come home and be absolutely witnessed in that crapness without him needing to be anything else. And it comes back to that doing good, like acting good. I don't need him to act in a happy mood in order for me to be okay, or in order for him to be worthy, or in order for me to be able to hold space for him. He doesn't have to act anything. He does have a responsibility to be able to manage and communicate and process his emotions in a way that doesn't harm us. That's important. But he doesn't have to be this super, happy, dandy dude all the time in order for us to have a healthy relationship. That's not a condition. So I love that you say it takes the individual to go on their own healing journey, because that's ultimately what it is. It's two individuals who have to take responsibility for their own crap, who have to be willing to go, I am willing to become the person that I need to become to have that relationship. But the thing is, that relationship may not be with this person. It might be, ideally it is, but without going on that journey ourselves to learn the skills that it's going to take to have that relationship, to be able to resolve the trauma and wounding that we need to resolve to have that relationship, whether it's with that person or not, we will never experience or co-create that relationship because we can't.
Yeah, wow.
A little rant from Ash.
Yeah, well, I love what comes up for me when you say that is choose a relationship, not the person. So instead of defining what the person is, it's like, how do you want to feel in that relationship, and how do you want to, I suppose, be seen and all of that. It's really important what you spoke about, because let's look at the dark, or the dark side of how, someone who goes to work, and we'll use this dynamic of a person that stays at home looking after kids, the other person goes out and is the breadwinner, and just for this example, we'll just talk about that. This person has this person at work has a bad day. They're getting crapped over by seniors or whatever it is. They may have been knifed in the back by something else. They may have had just a lot of work piling on top of them, and a whole lot of people disappointing them, not doing their load, and they come home and they have a bad day. Now, you could imagine that if that person comes home and doesn't act 100%, and that triggers that shame response in the other person that's at home, and that person goes, why do you always come home and dump on me? Which is fair enough, because you go from the perspective of the person that's at home. I've done all this work. Yeah, it's not your work, but it's my work, and it's all relative. And now you come home and you dump on me. And let's even take it further. Let's just say that person that goes to work's in a toxic workplace environment, and the person at home is already hypersensitive to the fact that as soon as this person comes home, I know it's on, because they always come home in a bad mood. And so it goes trigger, right? So we've got this cycle, and they're both in a shame response because for some reason I can't leave this job, and the other person, I can't let this person talk. But imagine if we flip that on its head, and the person that goes to work is given the green light to go, you have those emotions. And that person that comes home also gives permission for the person at home to say, I may not act in the most desirable way for you because my capacity is low, but you have the permission to feel your emotions. And we talk about the emotions over time when we have capacity, these kind of things. The communication alone will help unpick the tension. However, the shame response imagine we add this extra shame response, which is, I wouldn't have to do this if you loved me. Because if
you loved me enough, if I was enough for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
it's at the root of so much. And what's at the root of that is, I feel like you don't see me. I'm not seen, I'm not heard, and I don't matter. That is the antidote to healing shame and overcoming trauma, is to feel safe being seen, heard, and understood. And that is not, I don't know, put it this way. Maybe it's because people who grew up observing that and who have the skills don't end up in therapy, or it's because maybe those people don't exist. But I have never, ever had a client, when I asked them that question, did you grow up being seen, heard, and understood? And the answer is no. And I ask them, what does that look like? What do you need? And they've never had it modeled to them. They just don't know. And so that's then about developing the skills. So like you were saying about communication, how that can just poke a pin in the balloon of the, tension in the atmosphere. Healthy communication. Where did we ever learn what that looks like or sounds like? We haven't. And this is where I kind of learned so much in my work. My work went from really early on, I'm talking probably 3 or 4 years ago when I started Rise and Thrive. It was very therapeutic in nature. Now, yes, it's still heavily therapeutic, but it is so heavily focused on coaching. We literally talk about scripting. We go through around what to say. Why do we say it like that? How do we say it? When do we say it? Because those things are so important in feeling seen, heard, and understood. It's the antidote.
Absolutely. But I guess there's this sort of shame, like, okay, let's take it in this example where you've got someone going out and someone staying at home, and we will apply traditional models to that where the masculine goes out and the feminine stays home. And then let's apply the fact that a masculine should be strong enough to be able to deal with it. And the societal shame of, suck it up, right? And then that's kind of the start. So I can't communicate that, because if I communicate that, I'm not providing for you like I feel I should be. And the feminine at home, and again, this is a hypothetical, but the feminine at home is then just sort of saying, but I've always had it been instilled into me that, take your vows seriously, right? Let's just assume there's a marriage involved. Or hang on, if I really followed my heart's desire, one potential of that, if I could make the choice, is to leave this. And let's say we have kids. Okay, but then I'm a homewrecker, right? It was me that decided this. Am I being loyal? Am I being all of this? So when you feel as though you can't do anything else, you're no longer choosing the relationship. And at that point, it's very difficult to work on the relationship because it's no longer a choice. You're now surviving the relationship. You are simply a passenger. But if you can break through the shame and change that, because that is changeable, that is fluid, that's not hard set.
100%.
Choose the relationship. Choose yourself. Choose your partner, but in a way that's healthy for you.
And I just want to clarify on that. When you say choose the relationship, you can't continue choosing the old relationship, the way that relationship you've co-created in the dysfunction. You cannot keep choosing that. And so I use the framework, I literally call it the death, burial, and resurrection, where I'm really transparent with people and I say to them, the relationship that you guys had has to die. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you need to break up. No. What I am saying is the relationship that you guys built on the years of not having the tools, not having the resources, on your wounding, on your trauma, on your dysfunction, that relationship has to die. Then the burial is whatever happened in the past has to stay there. We can't go back in the past and we can't change it. So you don't get to continue punishing the person for the past where they did whatever they did in the dysfunction that was the co-creation of your relationship. So then if that old relationship is dead and the new, and it's buried, which means it's done, we're turning away from the past and we're turning towards the future. Let's get a really clear picture of what we want that future to look like. And that's when I bring in that concept of the resurrection. The resurrection is, what is the new relationship? What is that new, the rebirthing? What is that new relationship that you desire to co-create, and who do you need to be in order to have it? Which also, for the most part, is who do you need to stop being? And maybe you need to stop being the defensive, the egotistic, the narcissistic, the needy, the victim. There's lots of things we have to unbecome, and there's lots of things we have to unlearn. Maybe we need to stop being the fixer, helper, peacekeeper all the time. Maybe we need to stop being the rescuer. But all of those things we became as a product of our early life experiences and what we were taught. That we were adapted into that. And so the idea of the resurrection, as you say, is about choosing healthy relationship. It's about breaking the commitment to the relationship, as in the one that we have been living with and living in, and having two people, well, at least having one person who is committed to healthy relationship with or without the other person. And that's why what I say to people, I'll say to them, independent of the outcome of your relationship, are you willing and ready to do the work for you to have healthier relationship, regardless of if it's with that person or not? And when two people mutually as individuals say yes, they co-create and resurrect a relationship that is beyond what they even could have imagined was possible for them. When one person says yes, they outgrow the old relationship, and they outgrow the partner who's not willing to grow. And they have a beautiful, beautiful experience of living in harmonious relationship with their sense of self and preparing for a healthier relationship that they're finally ready for. There's no lose in that.
Yeah, and look, it's challenging, it's scary, but look, I'll say to sort of wrap things up, for me, it's harder to whinge about something that's a choice of mine than it is to be, powerless, right? So when we choose the relationship that you want, and and
stop settling for less.
Don't be ashamed, and know that there's been a lot of conditioning. Be gentle on yourself. Go through the healing. Start the process, and everyone at the moment's going through it in one way, shape or form at different varying levels. Just keep going at it. And for those fortunate enough to be watching on the video, you've probably noticed that my chair keeps on going down and up. So I hope you found that enjoyable and hilarious at the same time. But this one's going to be a little bit of a shorter one because I've got to go grab the kids. But until next week, people, have a great one. Remember, if you like the video.
Let us know. Yeah, I'd love, totally. I'd love to know what this has provoked for you, what you've learned through it, what you now have awareness of in how this might be playing out in your own life, in your own relationship. And I would love to know what you're going to do about it. If you need help in what to do about it, please reach out, because this is absolutely my zone of genius and it would be an honour to help you.
Beautiful. All right, till next week, people. Bye-bye.
Bye.